back to Children's Church. I'm so glad to have you here with me. And all this month we've been talking about small things in the hands of a giant God. And this week we're talking about one of the miracles of Jesus. So we're in the book of Matthew, chapter 14. We're not sword drilling it today because I have a little bit to read here. Not a lot bit, a little bit. It's not like last week where I read 38 verses in a row. That's too much. All right, so we're in Matthew chapter 14, verse 13. When Jesus heard about it, he withdrew from there by boat to a remote place to be alone. When the crowds heard this, they followed him on foot from the towns. As he stepped ashore, he saw a huge crowd, felt compassion for them, and healed their sick. When evening came, the disciples approached him and said, "This place is a wilderness, and it is already late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy food for themselves." "They don't need to go away," Jesus told them. "You give them something to eat." "But we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish here," they said to him. "Bring them here to me," he said. Then he commanded the crowds to sit down on the grass. He took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed them. He broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. Everyone ate and was filled, and then they picked up 12 baskets full of leftover pieces. Now those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So we call that the feeding of the 5,000, but they only counted the men. And we know it wasn't just men in the crowd. So some estimates say it could be up to 15,000 people, but we still call it the feeding of the 5,000 because that's the direct translation from the Bible. Now, the first 4 books of the New Testament are called the Gospels, and a lot of them have the same stories in them because they're different disciples telling stories of things that happened when they were with Jesus. So from other accounts of the feeding of the 5,000, we have a few more details. It's not that they went around and collected 5 loaves and 2 fish from a bunch of people. It was one person. One boy whose mother sent him with a lunch offered the small thing he had to Jesus. And Jesus did a great miracle with it. He gave God what he had, and God made it so much more. One small lunch in the hands of a giant God fed so many people. Why is that important? Well, all this month we've been talking about what God can do with small things. One small boy's lunch, one small lunch that she packed for a small boy, fed thousands of people in Jesus' hands. Well, how can we relate that to what we do in our life? Well, you know our church runs a food pantry. We give what we have, and God does more with it, feeds more people, helps more people. And that's a wonderful thing. God takes the small things we have and makes them great. Sometimes giving the small thing we have can touch thousands of people's lives. That doesn't just have to be food. It can be our faith. It can be our words. It can be our art. The things that God gave us that we give back to other people. Our encouragement. I know at least one person who's watching this who I know is just one of the best encouragers out there. I know someone else who's watching whose artwork is wonderful and who brings joy to other people when she shares it. The small things we give God and we give other people can make a huge impact. From 5 small loaves 5,000 people, small things in the hands of a giant God can make an entire world of difference. That's what I want you guys to remember for this week. Remember that Palm Sunday and Easter are coming up, and I'll be teaching those lessons the week before we actually celebrate, so you know what's going on, okay? I'll see you then. I love you very much. Have a wonderful week.